Stafford's task this time was to enter Madagascar, the place with the harshest environment in Africa. Within 10 days, he had to get from the starting point to a coastal fishing village 40 kilometers away. This time, Stafford could be said to have started with a hellish situation. The ground beneath his feet was all mud. Apart from some photographic equipment and communication tools, he also brought an automatically tracking drone this time, with the aim of shooting Stafford's predicaments from multiple angles. Based on the direction of the shadows, he determined the direction to his destination. This marshland was submerged by seawater twice a day, so Stafford needed to get out of here as soon as possible. But the knee-deep mud made his walk very difficult. Every step was accompanied by severe energy consumption. Stafford had to resort to crawling forward. In the end, he even walked on his knees. Finally, he came to a river course. According to the direction, he had to cross this river, but the crocodiles in the river made Stafford hesitate. If he risked swimming across, he would most likely become a meal. But what was worse was that the tide was rising. Stafford needed to leave the marshland immediately, or he would be submerged by seawater in a few hours. To save his life, Stafford had to choose to go in the direction opposite to his destination. Finally, Stafford found a sandbar island. He could only take a gamble that it wouldn't be submerged by seawater. When he arrived, it was already surrounded by seawater on all sides. It was getting dark. Stafford could only spend the night here. Today was another day of going hungry. Before dawn the next day, Stafford found that the seawater was ebbing. This was good news. He planned to continue on his way after the 2-hour ebb tide. His next goal was to get rid of the mangrove swamp and enter the woods. But he hadn't had a drink of water for 2 days. If he couldn't find fresh water within 12 hours, it would lead to severe dehydration. After walking for 3 hours, Stafford finally set foot on solid land. Soon he discovered the eggs of a grouse. Looking at the semi-transparent jelly, even though it was disgusting, Stafford could only close his eyes and swallow them. Instantly, he felt a surge of energy throughout his body. For him, with these egg candies, he would be fine today. After getting out of the mangrove swamp, Stafford entered a Baobab Forest. To be honest, the scenery was extremely beautiful. Baobab trees are known as the tree of life in Africa. They have an extremely long lifespan, and it's common to find ones that are over 1,000 years old. But Stafford's top priority now was to find water. He found a vine. After putting in a great deal of effort, he finally dug it out. Stafford devoured it, with its fresh and juicy flesh filling his mouth. It tasted similar to coconut. As night fell, Stafford planned to rest for the night before setting off again. The next day when Stafford set off, he found another baobab fruit. When he split it open, he exclaimed, "Wow, have you ever seen such a huge walnut? It even had a malt sugar flavor." Then he found 2 more and took them as dry rations, packing them up to take with him. He continued on his way. Stafford discovered a dry riverbed and started digging directly into the sand. Before he even really began, water started bubbling up. Stafford took the first drink of water in 3 days. It tasted really wonderful, like rotten ditch water. He made 2 holes at the back of something and used it as a water container. He took a taste and found the taste quite good. He continued walking along the riverbed. By afternoon, he had almost drunk up all the water, and Stafford was faced with the problem of water shortage again. Fortunately, he found a water hole. He took a sip and found it was fresh water. Stafford drank heartily while letting out strange laughter. With water, Stafford decided to set up camp and go into the woods to find some food. There might be crabs hiding in these holes. Stafford kept poking around with a stick and finally caught one. Once he had the first one, the second one couldn't escape either. But blue crabs weren't easy to deal with. Looking at his bleeding fingers, Stafford, who knew when to give in, decided to stop. He could have a hearty meal tonight. Looking at such a large piece of crab meat, with both water and meat available, Stafford fantasized that tomorrow would be even better. 6 days had passed. Stafford entered the desert area, without guide map. He needed to climb the sand dunes to check the direction, but climbing them was no easy feat. The sand was as slippery as cough syrup, making Stafford slide 2 steps back for every step forward, and consuming a large amount of energy. Finally, Stafford climbed up, but he found more sand dunes in front, blocking his view. He needed to climb over one sand dune after another to find a high point, to confirm his destination. This was really torturous. The hot temperature, the energy consumption, and the endless desert made Stafford feel desperate. After drinking the last bit of walnut yogurt, he became dejected and decided to have a good rest for the night before setting off again. He had never imagined that the environment in Madagascar could be so harsh. On the 7th day, without food or water, Stafford could only rely on his willpower to drive himself forward. Finally, he discovered cow hoof prints on the sand, which were signs of human activity. After climbing over the last sand dune, Stafford finally saw the most beautiful scenery in the desert: a village, the sea, and a boat. The challenge in Madagascar was a success. This was the only time Stafford failed a challenge in the Alone in the Wild series. In this episode, Stafford came to the Altai Mountains in Mongolia. The challenge route this time was to get from the starting point to a nomadic settlement 100 kilometers away. At the beginning, Stafford moved forward against the wind. The piercing cold wind hit him head-on. A drop in body temperature and dehydration were his first challenges, so his top priority was to find a wind-blocking shelter. The grove of trees in the distance looked good. It seemed full of vitality, but crossing the lake surface in front of him was no easy feat. There was a risk of falling into the water at any time. Stafford slipped a few times on it, and it seemed okay at first glance. But after taking just a few more steps, the ice layer under his feet started to crack. Seeing this scene, Stafford was also at a loss. He had to return to the shore and make other plans. Walking along the lake towards the Altai Mountains, he actually saw a farm in the distance. He hurried over to see if he could get a free meal. He knocked on the door politely, but there was no response for a long time. He could only pick up the cooking utensils on the ground, and also cook the farmer's wool. Nearby, Stafford also discovered famous paintings on the stone wall, which depicted lifelike animals. After walking along the lakeshore for the whole afternoon, Stafford finally arrived in the grove of trees. He didn't have time to build a shelter, so he had to make do with sleeping on the ground for the night. He found some shrubs to use as a mattress. The temperature would drop below 0 degrees Celsius at night. It seemed he was going to be cold and hungry tonight. Early the next morning, Stafford did some calisthenics. He had almost frozen into an icicle last night. He quickly moved around to restore his body temperature. He continued on his way under the sun. He discovered a ground squirrel hole, covered the whole entrance with a stone to prevent the squirrel from escaping. He filled a jar with water, and then poured the water into the hole. The ground squirrel hiding in the hole would rather die than be tortured by Stafford. Stafford showed off his trophies with great pride. After a bountiful harvest, Stafford crossed the grassland and arrived at the foot of the Altai Mountains. He started to set up camp in the grove of trees. To enjoy the delicious food quickly, he didn't plan to start a fire by drilling wood this time. He took out the batteries from his camera, connected the positive and negative terminals with wires, placed the tinder on the batteries, and in less than 3 seconds, the fire was lit. As the saying goes, with knowledge of science, math, and chemistry, you can go anywhere in the world. Stafford tore the mouse into pieces with his bare hands and put them into the pot one by one. Tonight was a sumptuous fresh meat soup. While waiting for the food to cook, Stafford quickly built his shelter. It was just a simple, slanted roof shelter. He didn't want to sleep on the ground like he did yesterday. He gave it a try, and it worked well. It blocked the wind and rain, and was comfortable and warm. Next came the food part. The aroma of the meat combined with the freshness of the soup. It tasted like beef, but its protein content was 5 times that of beef. On the third day, Stafford, full of energy, set off with his full gear. 3 hours later, he arrived at another lake. It looked very solid. Stafford decided to give it a try. He kept an eye on the movement under his feet all the way, walking across the lake surface with great trepidation. He started walking up the snow-covered mountain, but then he took a tumble and let out a series of squeaky cries. Fortunately, he was okay. After walking for the whole afternoon, he arrived at the foot of the mountain. His destination was behind that mountain, but climbing such a steep mountain was simply unrealistic. He could only plan to go back the way he came, and leave through the valley over there. It seemed that he had walked all day for nothing. It was really a loss. However, on the way back, he still found a surprise. It was a sheep that had been killed by wolves. After checking, he found that it hadn't been dead for long. He quickly carried it back to yesterday's campsite. After walking all day and returning to the starting point, Stafford was beaming with joy. Every part of the sheep was valuable. Stafford planned to make full use of it. First, he cut off the sheepskin. Then he cut some mutton to cook on a stone slab. The rest he smoked into dried mutton to eat on the way. Just look at this color. How could anyone not drool? Today was truly a wonderful day. But when Stafford got up the next day, he was dumbfounded. Outside, it was snowing heavily, like goose feathers. The distance was shrouded in mist, and he couldn't see the direction at all. It was too dangerous to set off in the rain and snow. He planned to rest for another day before leaving. Although he had been going in circles for 2 days, he couldn't do without a delicious roasted lamb leg. Looking at the steaming lamb leg, one could almost smell the aroma even through the screen. When he got tired of eating mutton, he went to dig up some wild onions. Stafford let out a contented, strange laugh. On the 5th day, the sun was high in the sky. It was a great day for mountain climbing. He packed his bags and set off. looking at the snowy scenery and eating dried mutton. Stafford was full of laughter all the way. After walking for 5 hours, he reached the mountaintop. Next it was time to walk down the snowy mountain path. Stafford was having a great time, but the next second, he turned into Edward and took a complete tumble. The rest of the journey wasn't so easy. The snow was knee-deep. With every step, half of his body sank in. It consumed a huge amount of energy each time. Stafford was having a tough time walking. He had to lie sideways on the snow and wiggle forward, but difficulties came one after another. The sunlight reflected off the snow was too intense. Walking on the snow for a long time could lead to snow blindness, which could even cause insomnia in severe cases. After walking for 3 hours, Stafford was still on the snowy ground. It seemed like there was no end in sight. The higher he went, the deeper the snow got, burying his entire body in it. He had to spend even more energy to pull his body out. Stafford was on the verge of collapse. Relying on his strong will, he started rolling forward on the snow. He even pushed the camera while pulling his backpack and crawling forward. But at this pace, it would take him at least a week to reach his destination. Finally, Stafford sensed danger. He couldn't continue going forward. His energy was completely drained. He was also getting farther away from the rescue team. If he kept going, he might face death. In the end, Stafford called the rescue team to terminate the challenge. He couldn't accept his failure. He hated failing. This decision was extremely difficult for him. He could go without food and drink, but he couldn't handle this endless snowy mountain. The rescue team came to pick him up. A dejected Stafford climbed into the carriage and slowly drove away. The challenge in the Altai Mountains was a failure.